There is an old rhyme in Cornwall. By tray, Paul and pen shall you know Cornishmen. It is a joke about how obvious Cornish surnames are, and it is completely accurate. If a name begins with Trey or Paul or Pen, it is almost certainly Cornish, and it almost certainly began as a place. But there is something underneath that rhyme that people miss. Those words are not English. They are not Old Norse or Norman French either. Trey means a farmstead or settlement. Paul means a pool. Pen means a head or a headland or the top of something. They are Cornish, and Cornish is a Brittonic language, which means it is a direct descendant of the language that was spoken across most of the island of Britain before the Anglo-Saxons ever arrived. English is the newcomer here. Cornish is what was already being spoken, and the geneticists have found something that fits it. When the largest ever study of British DNA mapped the population into clusters, one of the clearest boundaries anywhere in the country turned out to be the border between Cornwall and Devon. Not a vague gradient, a distinct division that tracks the River Tamar closely, and Cornwall came out as its own group, separate from the rest of England. The old border is still there in the data. These are 10 Cornish surnames and what they actually mean, ending with a man who built the first working steam locomotive on Earth, 21 years before George Stephenson got the credit, and who was buried in an unmarked pauper's grave. This is Dustin Stories. Subscribe, because the oldest thing in Britain is still hiding in the phone book. How Cornish surnames work. Almost all of them are places. That is the key difference from English surnames, which are frequently jobs, Smith, Baker, Turner, or nicknames. Cornish surnames overwhelmingly come from the farm or hamlet a family held, and Cornwall is covered in tiny settlements, each with its own name. Which is why there are so many of them, why so many are rare, and why a Cornish surname can often be traced to a specific spot on a map. If your name is Tregaskis, or Polglaze, or Penhaligon, there is a place, and you can go and stand in it. Number 10. Chegwidden and Chenoweth. These two are a pair, and they are the easiest translations in the language. Chai is a house. Gwyn is white. Chai Gwyn is the white house, and it gives Chegwidden. Noweth is new. Chai Noweth is the new house, and it gives Chenoweth. Somebody built a house, painted or lime-washed it white, and their descendants have been called the White House for 600 years. Somebody else built a new one, and their family are still called the New House, in a language that stopped being spoken generations ago. Number 9. Nance and Nancavel. Nans is a valley. Nance is simply the valley. Nancavel is generally read as the valley of a man called Kevel, and Nanskawan is the valley of elder trees. Names like this are why Cornish surnames sound so alien to English ears. They are not built out of English components at all. They are built out of a Celtic language on the same pattern as Welsh and Breton, which is why Nans and the Welsh Nant are the same word. And Breton is not a coincidence either. When Brittonic speakers were pushed west by the Anglo-Saxon expansion, some of them did not stop at Cornwall. They kept going across the Channel and settled the peninsula that is now Brittany, which is why it is called that. Cornish and Breton remained close enough that fishermen from the two coasts could reportedly still make themselves understood to each other into the modern period. Cornwall is not the western edge of England. It is the eastern edge of a Brittonic world that used to run from here to the Loire. Number 8. Boscawen and the Bos names. Bos means a dwelling. Boscawen is the dwelling by the elder tree. Bosustow, Bosanke, and Boskenna all come from the same root. The Boscawens became one of the great Cornish families. Admiral Edward Boscawen, born at Tregotnan in 1711, was one of the most successful naval commanders of the 18th century, and his sailors called him Old Dreadnought. He was on the Cornish coast in Cornish country, with a surname that means somebody's house by a tree. Number 7. The pen names. Pen means a head, a top, or a headland. Penrose is the head of the heath. Pengelly is the head of the grove. Penberthy, Pendarves, Penworn, and dozens of others all begin the same way. Penhaligon is usually read as the willow head, and the name is now carried by a well-known perfumer, and was carried by David Penhaligon, the Cornish MP, who died in 1986, and who was one of the most effective advocates Cornwall has had. And pen is the same word as the Welsh pen, which is why Wales has Penarth and Pen y Fan, and Cornwall has Penzance. Penzance is Penzance, the holy headland. Number 6. The Pole names. Pole means a pool. Polglaze is the green pool. Polkinghorn is generally read as the pool by the horn or the pool of the corner. Polwela, Polmere, and Polgut follow the same shape. The fictional Poldark takes the same element, invented from real Cornish place name components, which is why the name sounds so completely right to Cornish ears, despite never having existed. Number 5, Carn, Carveth, and the fort names. Ker or Car means a fort or an enclosure. Carn means a rock pile or a tor. Carney, Carveth, Carwithen, and Carew all come out of this group, and it puts you directly onto the Iron Age landscape, because Cornwall is dense with hill forts and cliff castles, and the families who farmed next to them took the name of the ruin. Richard Carew, who wrote the Survey of Cornwall in 1602, is one of the most valuable sources we have on Cornish life and on the state of the Cornish language at the moment it began to collapse. He recorded that most people could no longer speak it. Number 4, Angove. And Gof means the smith, not a smith. The smith, with the definite article built into the surname, which is a distinctly Cornish construction, and it belongs to one of the most important men in Cornish history. In 1497, Henry VII levied a heavy tax on Cornwall to fund a war against Scotland. Cornwall, a long way from Scotland and already resentful of English taxation, refused. A blacksmith from St. Keverne, Michael Joseph, known as Michael Angoff, which is to say Michael the Smith, led an army of perhaps 15,000 Cornishmen out of Cornwall and marched them to London. They got to Blackheath, which is about as far as any popular rebellion has ever got, and there they were destroyed by the Royal Army. Angoff was hanged, drawn, and quartered at Tyburn. Before his execution, he is reported to have said that he would have a name perpetual and a fame permanent and immortal. 500 years later, there is a memorial to him at St. Keverne, and his name is a Cornish surname, carried by people who mostly do not know they are called the Smith in a dead language. Number 3, Pentreath, Pentreth, the head of the beach, or the end of the sands, and this name is attached to the death of the Cornish language. Dolly Pentreath of Mousehole died in 1777, and she has been remembered ever since as the last native speaker of Cornish. She sold fish, she swore magnificently in a language almost nobody around her could follow, and she was visited in old age by antiquarians who wanted to hear it before it went. The claim is not quite right, and the truth is better. William Bodenar of Mousehole wrote a letter in Cornish in 1776, in which he said that he had learned the language as a boy going to sea with old men, and that there were then only about 4 or 5 people in the village who could still speak it. He died in 1789, so the language did not end with one woman on one day. It thinned out in 1 or 2 fishing villages among a handful of old people, and then it stopped. And then, remarkably, it came back. A revival began in the early 1900s, and Cornish is now spoken again, taught, written in, and formally recognized as a minority language. It is one of the very few languages in the world to have been genuinely brought back from extinction. Number 2, Trelawney, Trelawney. And Tre is the big one, the commonest element of all, meaning a farmstead or settlement. Trevithick, Trelawney, Tregaskis, Trelaw, Trevelyan, Trewen, Trescothick, Tremaine. There are hundreds. Trelawney is the name in the anthem. In 1688, James II imprisoned 7 bishops in the Tower of London for refusing to read his declaration of indulgence from the pulpit. One of them was Jonathan Trelawney, Bishop of Bristol, and a Cornishman from a well-known Cornish family. Cornwall reacted to the news of a Trelawney in the Tower with fury. A century and a half later, the Reverend Robert Stephen Hawker wrote a ballad about it, The Song of the Western Men, built around a refrain that was already traditional. And shall Trelawney die? Here's 20,000 Cornish men will know the reason why. It became the Cornish anthem, and it is sung at rugby matches and at Cornish gatherings all over the world. Trelawney was released incidentally. Nobody sings the ending. Number 1, Trevithick, another Tre name. It is generally read as the settlement of a man named Vithick, and the family came from the far west, around Camborne and Illigan, in the middle of the Cornish mining country. Richard Trevithick was born in 1771, the son of a mine manager, and he grew up surrounded by the most advanced heavy engineering on the planet, because that is what Cornish tin and copper mining was. The mines flooded constantly, and pumping them out required steam engines, and Cornwall therefore had the highest concentration of steam expertise anywhere. Trevithick did something with it that nobody else would risk. He built engines that used steam at high pressure. James Watt thought high-pressure steam was so dangerous that he opposed it outright. And he had good reason, because boilers exploded and killed people. Trevithick did it anyway, and high pressure is what makes an engine small enough to move. On Christmas Eve in 1801, he drove a steam carriage up a hill at Camborne with passengers on it. In 1804, at the Penydarren Ironworks in South Wales, he ran a steam locomotive on rails, hauling 10 tons of iron and 70 men, and won a bet doing it. That is the first working railway locomotive in the history of the world. It is 21 years before the Stockton and Darlington Railway. George Stephenson was 23 years old at the time and had not built anything. And Trevithick got nothing. He was a poor businessman, and he was restless. He went to South America to install engines in the silver mines of Peru, got caught up in the wars of independence, lost everything, and spent years trying to get home. He was eventually given his passage back to England by a young engineer he met by chance in Colombia, who happened to be Robert Stephenson, George's son. He died in 1833 in Dartford in lodgings with no money. His workmates at the local engineering works paid for his funeral and walked behind the coffin, and he was buried in an unmarked grave. The man who invented the locomotive has no known burial place. The name on the railways is Stephenson's, 10 names. A white house and a new house, 2 valleys, a dwelling by an elder tree, a row of headlands, a green pool, an Iron Age fort, a blacksmith who marched to Blackheath, a fishwife who outlived her own language, a bishop in the tower, and an engineer in a pauper's grave. And one last thing about Cornish surnames, because it is the reason so many people watching this will have one without ever having been to Cornwall. When Cornish mining collapsed in the 19th century, the miners left. And they left in enormous numbers. They went to Michigan and Wisconsin, to California, to South Australia, to South Africa, to Mexico, to Brazil. They were the best hard rock miners in the world and everybody wanted them. They were called cousin jacks. And the saying was that wherever there was a hole in the ground anywhere on earth, you would find a Cornishman at the bottom of it. They took the pasty with them. In Real del Monte in Mexico, where Cornish miners work from the 1820s, they still make pastes. And they still hold a festival for them. There are more people of Cornish descent outside Cornwall than in it. If you carry one of these names, the place it comes from is a specific field in the far west of Britain, and you can find it on a map. If your surname is on this list, subscribe to Dustin Stories. We take names back to the ground they came out of, like the video. Drop a comment with your surname and where in the world your family ended up, and we will tell you what we can find. And thank you for watching. We will see you in the next one.